Kyle Shanahan became the head coach of the 49ers, we've heard one thing about his offense. It's easy for quarterbacks. Well, apparently there's someone out there that says the complete opposite. We'll let you hear it and judge for yourself on today's Gold Standard Podcast. What is good, everybody? Welcome to another Gold Standard Podcast on the Gold Standard Podcast Network, part of the Pro Football Insiders. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera alongside Levin Black. Hi, Levin.
This is not Friday. You're not talking to Michelle. You got to come up with a different shtick for introducing.
Fine. I'll do it on a different day, though. It is Wednesday, July 9th. Rookies report in less than a week, Levin. Are you excited yet?
No. Rookies reporting doesn't matter. That's like pitchers and catchers reporting to spring training. Okay. When spring training actually starts, that's when you start to get something meaningful. When training camp starts, that's when you start to get something meaningful. I'm not going to say you start getting great info because it's still a bunch of it's filtered about 5 different times before it gets to you. Put it that way.
That's actually a really interesting thing. And by the way, I'm not sure if your mic is working or not. Sounds like maybe it isn't. I'm not sure. Usually you sound a little different to me. I don't know if it's my headphones.
It might be your headphones. I'm pretty sure my mic is working. Let me double check to see it's on. Yeah, everything's normal.
All right. Well, that's really weird. Anyway, but you talk about the filters, and I think that's really interesting because it sort of leads into what we want to talk about today, because Brett Kollmann, in the bootleg summer series that he's doing all his team previews, had something to say about Brock Purdy and the 49ers offense that is very different from the narrative that we have heard about the 49ers and their offense ever since Kyle Shanahan became the head coach. And it's a little frustrating to me because I just want to know the truth. I want to know, is this offense quarterback friendly or is it not quarterback friendly? And it is weird to me that we are all looking at the same film. The games are on TV. We all have the same information. And yet people can come away with wildly different opinions based on the same exact thing. And it's frustrating to me because I just want to know the truth one way or another as someone that knows a lot about football, but certainly not the smartest football mind out there by any stretch of the imagination, certainly has a lot more to learn, much like you.
Yes, but I mean, I can explain to you why there's 2 different versions. Some people say it's quarterback friendly. Some people say it's not. Because it's extremely quarterback friendly if you can do one thing: get through your progressions. If you have the mental capability of getting through your progressions, you will have a very easy time doing decently for a starting quarterback, a la Jimmy Garoppolo. You know, it is not an offense that I think asks a ton physically from a quarterback. You just have to be able to go through the progressions and trust them. I mean, we've even heard Brock Purdy say that. If you trust what Kyle is saying and you just go through your progressions, you will hit a pretty high level of success. You will have a high success rate. If you start ad-libbing too much, you're going to end up trying to do too much and make it worse. And at the same time, there are a lot of quarterbacks out there, I might even say a majority, that you cannot get through progressions. They lack the mental fortitude to do it. It's something you have to be quick. You have to be, I think, somebody that's naturally a decisive person because you can't hesitate. And I think a majority of quarterbacks aren't that. And so if you are not somebody that can get through progressions as a quarterback, you will fail miserably in this offense because that is a demand. That is a must in this offense.
Let's take a listen to Brett Kollmann, who hosts the Bootleg Football Podcast. They're doing a preview every day. They're doing a different team preview. Yesterday, I believe, was the 49ers. Listen to him talk about Brock Purdy in this offense.
That Brock Purdy is propped up by the Niners rather than the Niners are being propped up by Brock Purdy is ridiculous. This team, I am not even kidding, would be one of the 5 worst teams in the NFL if they did not have Brock Purdy, and it's not even close. Like, they are objectively bad. At least they were objectively bad in so many ways. And the only reason they were sort of kind of mid was because of the existence of Brock Purdy. He is not a system quarterback. He is the system. You plop a lot of starters from around the league in this offense, the way they run it. We'll get into that in a second. You put a lot of starters around the league, good starters, on this team and ask them to do the same things that Purdy was doing, they would fail. He is worth every single penny. He is the only reason all of these people still have jobs, because if you look at their draft history, there's a lot more misses than hits there. Like, this roster has been depleted so much, and the only reason it still works is because they hit on a 7th round pick a few years ago that is the glue that holds the entire franchise together.
So am I crazy, or is that literally the complete opposite narrative of what we've heard about Brock Purdy and this offense since Kyle Shanahan became the head coach?
I think things have changed since Brock came in, for one, for a roster. I think Brett has some good points in there, but he goes way too far into hyperbole. He goes way too far with it. No, this is not a bottom 5 roster if you take Purdy off of it. That's a joke to say. Sorry. It's a flat out joke to say that. It is not that bad of a roster, but it's not an elite roster anymore. It's an elite roster. I think if every single person was healthy, you would still have elite talent around Purdy. Now, last year, you could argue that what he played with was one of the worst rosters. And that means you're looking specifically at the offense and the supporting cast around him. While his wide receivers were hurt, it wasn't just Ayuk. Jennings was in and out of the lineup. Debo missed some time.
Pearsall.
Obviously, Pearsall missed pretty much the first half of the season. But you also had Trent Williams gone for part of it, and you had Christian McCaffrey gone for pretty much all of it. So his supporting cast was a bunch of backups for the most part. So you could say last year he had a bad supporting cast, but that's not what the roster is right now. And the roster, if you throw in the defense, it's not a bottom 5. Like that raises, because the defense, I mean, it's not dominant. I don't think the defense is a dominant unit anymore, but there's still enough talent there to, I would say, be like right in the middle of the league. So he has a point to make. And the point is, this is not the roster that Purdy had when he started. It has changed dramatically, and it is much worse than what it was when he came in, but he just goes way too far with it.
Excuse me. I agree that the roster, I think, is better than he says it is, but also I do agree that there's been erosion there. We've talked about it. I don't have to name the draft picks. Everybody listening to this knows the draft picks and the terrible picks that have been made. But I thought it was really interesting to say that, to hear him say that Brock Purdy is the system, because that's the number one knock on Purdy, is that he's the biggest beneficiary of the system. So I continued listening to the episode because I wanted to hear the explanation for the whole thing, because it was the complete opposite of everything that we've heard about Brock Purdy. And it was a very long answer, and I've cut it down a little bit. So I want to make sure I set it up to provide the context that I cut out when I shortened the answer. Basically, Brett says there's 2 ways for an offense to create space. One is play action under center, which sucks up the linebackers and creates more area for you to throw. And the other is motion before the snap and motion at the snap. The Niners did some of the play action stuff, but they did a ton of the motion at the snap stuff, and they were very, very good at it. Now, with that setup, here's the rest of Brett's answer on why Brock is so good and why he thinks that Brock is the system, to use his words.
A lot of veteran quarterbacks, and like, I don't like that much motion. I want the picture to stay static pre-snap to post-snap so I can see the rotations easier and have a better understanding of where all these DBs are going. Whereas Brock Purdy's like, give me all the motion. Like, I'm going to be able to track it pre-snap to post-snap. I'm going to see how they're spinning. Or in some cases, I've done so much film study that I know if we show them certain motions, I know how they're going to react to it, and then I can just glance at it and then see and kind of confirm pre-snap what they're doing, and then just read it out post-snap. But that takes a lot of film study, and also just the unfair advantage of having processing speed, which not everybody does have. And it's stylistically also very, very difficult to run your offense that way. And when I look at this offense that really, really emphasizes motion and post snap processing, reactions to motion, and how effectively Brock not only does that, but then also uses head fakes and glances and other stuff to move these linebackers out of the way. Because keep in mind, if you're not doing hard play action fakes from under center, there's nothing to keep those, or there's nothing to stop those hook defenders from just staying at depth. Like, you're not drawing them up. So the quarterback then has to be the one to move them by himself. And you can kind of get a picture of why this isn't just an easy quarterback friendly offense. And it's really more, you have to have a brain back there to operate it. You have to have a guy who understands space. You have to have a guy who understands how to manipulate and how to move defenders. And they have to be accurate and have the requisite arm strength to thread those needles over the middle, which is where Purdy tends to operate, over the middle of the field. It's not an easy offense. It's really not.
So your thoughts?
It's kind of the same thing. As long as you watch film, which if you don't watch film as an NFL quarterback, you're not going to last as the starter. I mean, you look at, there are so many examples of quarterbacks who maybe had success when they first came into the league, and then they faltered, and after they retire, they talk about, yeah, I never watched film. Vince Young is one. Michael Vick talked about how Andy Reid in Philly taught him how to watch film and break it down because he had never done it. He said he never watched any film whatsoever when he was in Atlanta. Well, Michael Vick in Atlanta had highlights, but he also was limited. Yeah.
Sorry, not to interrupt you. Not only did he say he never watched film in Atlanta, he said it to his former head coach that was interviewing him that got fired because Michael Vick never watched film.
Yeah, exactly. But I think as long as you have somebody that is watching film, it is an easy offense to succeed in. It has, I think, a certain bar. As I said, mentally, you have to be at a certain level to be able to find that success. But if you are there, it is a very easy offense to succeed in. And I will say I fundamentally disagree with what he said about pre-snap motion and how it helps a quarterback. He said that makes it difficult for the quarterback. Hell no, it doesn't. It makes it difficult for everybody but the quarterback. For the quarterback, it allows him to see what the defense is doing and the adjustments, and he gets a clue into what they're going to be running. For the offensive line, it messes up their timing. For the receivers, that's a lot to pay attention to. Who's going in motion? Do they get stopped? Do they get set? Things like that. It's harder for, I think, everybody but the quarterback. For the quarterback, the pre-snap motion is by far a net benefit. And you can look at so many quarterbacks out there that have said that. Tua's talked about how it helps him know what to do. Purdy himself has talked about how sometimes in the motion, he knows before the snap what is going to happen. So I just fundamentally disagree with some of the things he was saying. But I do want to say, I do think Purdy elevates this offense, takes it to a different level. But it's just he's trying to give Purdy all of the credit, and that's nonsense because there's a decade worth of history prior to Purdy that proves no, it's not just Purdy.
So for the record, I reached out to Brett. I want to get him on to see because I want to ask him a lot of the questions that you're bringing up because I'd heard the exact same thing from that you heard. Pre-snap motion helps the quarterback gather information about what the defense is. But I also thought that Brett's explanation was interesting about how sometimes it's easier for a quarterback to see the defense, make their prediction about what it's going to be, then drop back and see the picture, as opposed to if you got guys in motion at the snap specifically, the defense is changing at the snap specifically because you are changing it with the motion. So then once you get the snap, you then have to kind of take a look at it and see, like, is the picture changing the way I thought, and that kind of a thing. I want to ask him about that because he's essentially going away from the conventional wisdom that I had heard. And again, I just want to know what the truth is.
For whether or not it helps a quarterback, I'm going to take NFL quarterbacks' words. And there have been a lot of quarterbacks that have talked about how it helps, that it tips them off. They're not specifically, I think maybe Tua is the only one that comes to mind that specifically talked about how the pre-snap motion helps him. But a lot of them in their answers to different things, whether they're talking about a specific play where they got a touchdown or something, they have said, well, we had so and so in motion, and I saw how the defense was moving, and I knew they were going to be in this coverage. And that tells you it's helping the quarterback. And there's so many quarterbacks in the NFL that have said that, to where it's not a question to me. The truth is, pre-snap motion helps the quarterback. Are there some things that become more difficult for the quarterback because of pre-snap motion? Yeah, it's not like nothing is negatively impacted, but the things that are negatively impacted are overcome in my opinion, a very large degree by the benefits that come with it.
What I think, the more we talk about this, what I'm sort of piecing together is, I think that the truth, as most often happens, lies somewhere in the middle. Just because the quarterback doesn't have to set the protections because the offensive line does in this system doesn't mean it's necessarily easy for a quarterback. I think it probably leans more to what you're saying. I think you are right. See what I did there? I think you are right in that if you reach a certain level when it comes to mentally and dealing and with the processing and the studying of film and all of that, then there are a lot of answers for you in this offense. So I think that, maybe we or people in general sort of take for granted that every quarterback has that sort of minimum level of, I don't want to say intelligence because it sounds mean, but that's sort of football intelligence. And maybe not everybody has that. And maybe Brock has it over and above what a lot of guys have.
And I think most of us would agree he does. I think some of your specifically athletic quarterbacks, and there are some pocket passers that are also have failed the mental aspect because they never trained themselves on how to break down film and things like that. But specifically, the athletic quarterbacks, they've been able to get away with it because they can. I didn't read that correctly. That guy was covered. Oh no, I didn't get through my progressions. Let me just buy time here and figure something out. You know what I mean? There's a crutch, so to speak, that allows them to get out of jail free for not being able to break down film, not being able to recognize coverages pre-snap, things like that. And so it's just a natural thing. It's no different than to put it in more of like a layman's ability, but still pertaining to sports. Somebody that is naturally tall and they play basketball, whether they make it, to the NBA or they're just in high school, what do they naturally develop into? Kind of a bigger brute person who plays in the post, because that was what was easy for them. So they didn't do all the dribbling and learning how to do a crossover and all of that. There's a certain if you have a natural thing that makes it easier for you, it's hard to recognize that and say, I know that can become a weakness of mine. I will limit myself because I'll keep going to the easy thing. So I'm going to force myself to develop the hard things. And you do that all through your career. And then you get to the NFL. And at the NFL level, they say, no, you have to know the mental part. Otherwise, you cannot succeed. There is no quarterback in this league that can succeed that can't break down film. Now, some can break it down better than others, but you have to be able to watch film and at least recognize coverages.
Right. Like if you can only dribble with your right hand, but you get by everybody with your right hand your whole life, you never learn how to dribble with your left. And then you get to the NBA and everybody forces you to go left. And whether or not you survive depends on how fast you can develop that. Johnny Dell of the Johnny Dell Football Academy and us here at the Gold Standard says, I think the important caveat is that if the guy doesn't get overwhelmed by the data, it's helpful, meaning pre-snap motion. But the guy has to be able to not get overwhelmed, which isn't as common as you think. Johnny agrees with what you said. By the way, Johnny and I will be doing a show tomorrow. We'll be breaking down the safeties as we continue our film preview. I may talk to him a little bit about this too, because Johnny's one of the smartest people I know when it comes to film. So I'd be interested to hear his thoughts on it. I also tried to enlist help on Twitter, Levin, talking about
before
this.
you go to Twitter, let me say the Johnny Dell, I wanted to make a point on that because I was
Okay.
actually going to put that comment up when I saw it. I agree. It's not as common as most people think, but I'm going to add a caveat to his caveat.
No boy.
Kyle only brings in quarterbacks that have that. Trey Lance is the only quarterback I would argue that he's brought in that he didn't know whether or not he has that, and turns out he did not. I think have the capability of breaking down film like he wanted. But you can look at, Sudfield. The reason why that guy was here was not because of his physical traits. It's because he had the mental capability that is needed to at least somewhat succeed in this offense. You need to have that ability. And I think Kyle recognizes that. And I think he's capable of, when he talks to people before he signs them, before drafting them in interviews, he can pick up on, does this guy have a, certain level of being able to recognize coverages? If I say, hey, when you see cover 2, what do you think? And they can tell me like the things that typically beat cover 2. He can say that, he can talk to a free agent, or he can do that in an interview in the pre-draft and know whether the guy's likely to have that innate ability to do that. And so I think Kyle knows that and he recognizes that. But before we move on to Twitter, the point that I want to make is saying Purdy is the system, to me, is somewhat laughable, because this is not the first place Kyle Shanahan has been. Purdy is not the first quarterback he's had. There are plenty of quarterbacks that have made their careers with Kyle Shanahan, Matt Schaub, and there are quarterbacks who elevated their careers to a level that they had never achieved before and never achieved again, Matt Ryan, with Kyle. So you cannot say any quarterback, I don't care if Patrick Mahomes was in this offense, you could not say Patrick Mahomes is the system. The truth is that there is a great system that's easy to succeed in if you have the mental capability, and Purdy elevates it.
Well, that's another thing I want to ask Brett. That's why I asked him to come on. Like, these are all valid questions that I think are worth asking, and I'd like to hear his response to all of those. Even the Trey Lance thing, though, as Lee points out, Lance reportedly picked up the playbook like lightning fast. Remember, they gave him some of the playbook, and he hit them up like a week later or something, was like, give me more. Like, I've got it. Now, whether or not he could actually translate that out in the field is a whole separate thing.
Right, but he didn't do the film stuff. Like, we've heard, I guess it's not fully confirmed, but we've heard, they did the whole iPad thing where they were tracking time, and he barely even touched it. I think Lance's problem is that he did not get enough starting experience to learn how to break down film, and he's not getting the time to do it in the NFL. Nobody's saying, we're going to take our lumps for a year or two while you learn and we'll teach you. He never got that opportunity, and I think that's what he needed.
I felt like the Lance thing with the film was that they said that Lance was watching more than anybody, and Kyle was like, well, that stuff can be manipulated. I thought that if I'm remembering that correct, not that we need to go and rehash all that. Anyway. Wedge Antilli says, pundits consistently undervalue decision-making and overvalue physical ability. If a quarterback consistently throws to the other team, who cares if he can throw the ball into in a hurricane into a keyhole? I agree with you, Wedge. Where you throw it and your decision-making and all of that stuff, I do think is undervalued. I think that people, I call it throw porn on Twitter. They would rather put up a 60-yard against his body over the middle laser that's incomplete, that's uncatchable, than a 10-yard layered throw over the middle of the field that's caught, that maybe is not as hard as Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes can throw it. I've said that for years, and I do think that is true. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I tried to get some help on this. Like, what is the truth about this offense? Is it quarterback friendly? Is it all Brock? What's going on? And the person that I asked for help was JT O'Sullivan of the QB School, and he has responded. Thank you, JT. His response, quote, I got nothing new for you. Time will probably tell one way or the other, but for now, I continue to think the Niners have had the Avengers out there on offense and calling plays, and Brock makes them better. That's probably the realistic answer, right? Somewhere in between. Yeah, Shanahan is good. Yeah, the people around Brock are good. And also, he makes them better. Multiple things can be true at the same time, but in football analysis especially, we don't like that. It's got to be one thing or the other.
Yeah, and what I was saying earlier is, on paper, they have the Avengers. Last year, he did not have them.
Right.
Last year was, the way I thought of putting it prior to the show is, last year you got to see what Purdy looked like if he was drafted number 1 overall, meaning he went to a terrible team. Yeah, that's what Purdy would look like as a number 1 overall pick on a terrible team. He looks good. He looked like he made some plays that not a lot of quarterbacks can make, but there were also mistakes there, and there was a lot of wasted opportunity. I mean, we had the drops. There was a period there in the middle of the season where we lost games because people like Debo were dropping critical catches that into drives. and it was just guys could not get open. There is a certain limit, and I think that's something that we often don't take into account enough when evaluating a quarterback. I do think that there is a lot of quarterbacks out there that could have been really good. I'm not going to say Hall of Fame level quarterbacks that never got the opportunity, but I think there are a lot of quarterbacks out there that could have made Pro Bowls that just never quite got the opportunity, because when they got an opportunity, either guys were hurt or they were playing with a whole bunch of sorry wide receivers who couldn't get open. And so they couldn't show what they could do, and then they never got a chance.
I agree with you. And I have said this for years. More quarterbacks fail because of problems from the neck up than the neck down. I really do think that is, whether it's opportunity, whether it's, just not being able to do there is such an incredible mental workload that has to go into being quarterback. For example, Johnny Dell actually brought this up on the last film breakdown we did, because we looked at wide receivers, which I highly recommend you go and check out. Of course, not now. This is our time. But he showed from the 49ers playbook that there are something like 109 different routes that receivers have to learn. And each one of those routes has adjustments that the receiver has to make based on how the defense comes out in their coverage. If they're in nickel, they do this. If they're in, dime, they do this. If there's one high safety, two high safety, there's all these adjustments. That's why Kyle Shanahan doesn't need to let Brock Purdy have access to the entire playbook at the line of scrimmage, because all of that stuff, all of the audibles that you would make at the line of scrimmage are already baked into the play call. Now, that also means that everybody has to be on the same page when that happens. The quarterback has to be on the same page. The receiver has to see the defense the same way. Receiver has to adjust the route in his head, and everybody's got to be on that. And that is, that's a lot of things that have to go your way. But I totally forgot the rest of what I was going to say. I totally lost my way there.
Well, I'll say this.
Oh, the mental workload. Yes, I'm sorry. I caught up to myself. Yes, that is why the quarterback has so much responsibility on his shoulders.
So what I was going to say is, one, I'm getting an echo. I don't know why. In the past, it was something new, but I might have to leave and come back in and see if it fixes it, or if I can just make it through it. But I think even at the NFL level, that things change for wide receivers, like drastically, that people do not value. That did fix it, by the way, you leaving and coming back. But I think a lot of colleges, and I know this from Purdue back in the day when they kind of revolutionized the spread offense with Joe Tiller, that then led to a spread offense revolution at the college game. They just basically spread them out and they move them around. And if you do that at the college level, you can get open. At the NFL level, that's not good enough anymore. And like you said, it's something, like the post route, yeah, Ayuk might have a post route pre-snap, but while he's running, if he sees the safety drop, he might have the option of changing it and going directly across the middle. Yep. Or going, if he sees the safety go deep middle and it's a single high safety, deep middle, that means the sideline is open and he'll cut it and go to the outside. Like, there's a lot of different variations, but that is something that is new, I think, at the NFL level a large majority of the time. There's a few college offenses that do get that complicated, but a lot of them do not. Like even Urban Meyer's offense did not do that. Urban Meyer's offense is a combination of he went, and I think it was Nebraska's option offense from back in the day when they were dominating in the 90s, and he approached Joe Tiller with his spread offense while he was at Purdue after leaving Wyoming, and he combined those two offenses, and that's how Urban Meyer found success. He didn't create crazy complicated going to the NFL level, because college kids are not going to be capable of doing that. It is something that at the NFL level, it suddenly becomes a thing. And I think that's why some wide receivers come in and they have crazy speed and they can catch the ball like really well and they can do everything, but they do not have the capability of recognizing the defense and changing things so that they can get consistently open and the defense can just cover them and they never make the adjustment.
Well, number one, I think you just went on that whole explanation just to get Purdue into the show. So
I did not. It just went there. But
Oh, yeah. It's amazing how often we end up talking about Purdue.
I mean, there's a lot of things that for wide receivers that the NFL becomes new. I mean, some is you got to be able to beat the press all of a sudden. You got to be able to run really crisp routes because the defense is just too fast and too good. It hits a whole new level on the defense than you do in the college game. I think there are more, and it's changing slightly, I think, but there are more athletic freaks on the offensive side of the ball than the defense, because naturally, if you're an athletic freak when you're a child, you want to go score the touchdowns, right? So you get a lot more of the athletic freaks on offense, and it's not until the NFL level that you consistently are facing 11 athletic freaks on the other side of the ball on defense.
And I think going back to what you were saying about the wide receiver route adjustments, it's it's not like Madden, right? Where you pick the play and the receiver runs that route no matter what. And I think a lot of people think that it is, and it's not. And not just for the 49ers. It's not like that for a lot of teams. Johnny Dell says the workload and reaction are what isn't normal. I think of a guy like Ken Dorsey, super smart, understands football incredibly well, but couldn't process and react at the necessary speed for a quarterback. Oh, Ken Dorsey.
He also didn't have a stronger arm than I do.
Yeah, well, honestly, I don't remember, but 49ers legend, Ken Dorsey. Let me just say, I got in trouble. Did you see what happened on Twitter yesterday, Levin? I got in trouble a little bit.
I have no social media, so no.
That's right. Okay, so I forgot that you're off Twitter now.
I'm off all of it, honestly, but
I think it was 49ers Web Zone. Yes. They put up a tweet, and it was it linked to an article about Brent Jones talking about Ricky Pearsall. And so here's the tweet. I'll put it up on the screen. If you're just listening, it says, from yesterday, 49ers legend compares Ricky Pearsall to this rising NFL star. So, of course, I was like, ooh, what 49ers legend? Let me click on it. Clicked on it, and it was Brent Jones. Now, I said this on Twitter. People didn't really care. No disrespect to Brent Jones. He was a good tight end for this team. Good player. 49ers legend? Brent Jones? I'm sorry. Not a 49ers legend. He's just not. And you think I'm crazy?
I mean, my gut reaction was to say, no, he's a legend. Then I started thinking about it. I was like, I think it's the word legend that goes a little too far.
Yeah.
They said former 49ers great. I would have been okay with that. But legend is, you better be in the Hall of Fame at minimum.
Right. This isn't the Falcons we're talking about, okay? Or the Panthers. 49ers legend, Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, Steve Young, Ronnie Lott, Leo Nomolini, the $1 million backfield. These are 49ers legend. Dwight Clark, 49ers legend. Brent Jones? No, man. No.
No, I will say, was it that egregious of a thing? No, like I wouldn't have. It's one of those things that I might have had the thought of, that's a little too far, but I don't think I would have gone so cared enough to respond. And I can be a stickler for like little things like that. I don't think this one would have gotten me there.
Johnny Dell says he's a legendary roommate of Steve Young. That is true. And he actually was really almost like a psychiatrist for Steve Young. Like he helped Steve, by Steve's own admission, through a lot of stuff, just the stress of being Niners quarterback and succeeding Joe Montana and all that stuff. Absolutely. And I get it. As Filthy Casual says, he's a 49ers team Hall of Famer. I don't care, man. Team Hall of Fame are ridiculous. Like they put everybody in those things. Not a 49ers legend. I'm sorry. Anyway, it wasn't a big thing, but I tweeted it out. And I didn't think it was a big deal. And people were like, how dare you disrespect Brent Jones? And I was like, give me a break.
I'm trying to think how many Pro Bowls he went to, and I can't even think of one. But he kind of, he's on that borderline of like half his career. I wasn't old enough to remember. So
he went to 4 Pro Bowls. He was, I believe, a 3-time second team All-Pro. Again,
like I said, he's close to that legend, but not there.
Fine player, but not a 49ers legend. Keeping the Faith says words like legend and GOAT get thrown around these days. I completely agree. I don't think that people know what that word means, quite frankly. Anyway, I didn't mean to get hung up on a whole thing there, but
Yes, you did.
became a thing. I didn't realize people would care that much. Like, holy crap. It's Brent Jones we're talking about, okay? He's the third best tight end in 49ers history. Generously. Kittle, Vernon, Brent Jones. Like, calm down, people. Benali says he's not an NFL legend. He's in the 49ers Hall of Fame. I think 49ers legend is a fair moniker. Benali, that's probably the first comment you've ever made that I disagree with.
I'll say this. I had that thought when you were doing the initial talk, like, well, I think he's definitely not an NFL legend, but 49ers legend might be good enough. And then I ultimately decided no. But I'll say this. If somebody thinks that that's a good enough argument, it's not something I'm going to argue against because I think it's a sound argument. I just don't quite get to that point.
Brisbee Life on Twitch. Shout out to the Twitch fam. Says, enough of your Brent Jones slander, Rob. Also, I think this is Gen Z nomenclature that you're just a little too worried about. Perhaps.
I mean, Gen Z probably doesn't even know who Brent Jones is. So.
And then we have this comment. 762 says, I'm out. Any player from that 49er era is a legend. This guy is a clown. Brent, is that you?
I'm trying to figure out what the 762 is because there's a space there that makes me think it's like jersey numbers or something.
I don't know. Anyway, I mean, the Brent Jones love. Terror Dome. One-time first-team All-Pro. No, he wasn't a one-time first-team All-Pro. That wasn't an AP All-Pro. Back in the day, there were different agencies that gave out All-Pros. He was a first-team All-Pro, but it wasn't the Associated Press.
And even probably Sporting News.
No, it wasn't Sporting News. It was like
not even that one, huh?
No, it was like the Newspaper Association or something. I looked it up yesterday. Even if you go in the announcement from the 49ers, it says he's going into the Team Hall of Fame. They recognize 2 or 3 second-team All-Pros. So calm down. And yes, he was a 3-time Super Bowl champ. A lot of guys that played for the 49ers in that era are 3-time Super Bowl champs. Anyway. All right. And again, I like Brent Jones. He's a good player. But to me, he's not a 49er legend. Now, getting back to Brock Purdy, what I originally wanted to talk about pertained to Brock Purdy today wasn't about the Brett Kollmann thing. That just popped up like an hour and a half before the show. So I wanted to bring it to people. Brock sat down with the Bussin' with the Boys podcast this week. And not going to lie, if you're a 49er fan and you follow this team closely, they rehashed a lot of the same stuff about the draft and being the last pick and the injury and all that stuff, which is fine because a lot of people that don't follow the 49ers closely probably don't know a lot of that stuff. But at the end, they asked him kind of leading questions, but it was fun. It was things that you would be willing to do to get a Super Bowl. He said he'd be willing to cut off a finger on his left hand to win a Super Bowl. Then they asked him, you win a Super Bowl this year, but you never play again afterwards, which is, again, a leading question, like kind of a funny question, but take that for what it is. But I loved Brock's answer. Take a listen.
Would you end your career?
He didn't answer that question.
Dude, I don't want to end my career because we can go win more, you know? Like, why would I end the career just for one more when we can win multiple?
I love that answer. I freaking love that answer. And not every quarterback is wired that way, 11. And I get that fans may have a different answer. Steph Sanchez was on board with it. Just give me the one Super Bowl. I don't care if we ever make it again because I've never seen one. And I totally get that. But I want my quarterback to answer exactly the same way Brock did. Because you got to be wired a certain way to not just win one, to want to win multiple, and to think you're good enough to win multiple. I love that answer.
Yeah, I was going to have a similar, because when they asked the question, you know, there was probably 30 seconds of going back and forth before he truly answered the question. You know, they kept trying to add things to it, like you're an all-pro, you know, first team all-pro, you win an MVP, things like that. To all of them, I would have had the same answer, and I had the thought immediately when they asked it. And the answer is no, because I could not live with myself. If I'm in my 4th year of my career, I still have my prime to come. I win a Super Bowl, let alone an All-Pro and an MVP. I could not live with myself calling it quits after that because I would forever wonder what I could have been. I will forever wonder how many could I have won if I stuck around. So no, that's why I say no, because it's not me saying I'm going to win multiple. It's me saying I have to know what my career could have turned into. Otherwise, it would eat me up to the point that it would probably end up destroying me.
You know, if you followed the NBA at all in the NBA Finals, Tyrese Halliburton, a player for the Pacers, had a really bad calf injury. And they were like, you should be resting this for weeks. And it was game 7. And he was like, screw that. I'm playing. And he played and he blew out his Achilles in the first quarter and missed the rest of the game, obviously. And the Pacers lost the championship. But I totally get why he played. Because if he didn't play and they lost for the rest of his life, he is sitting there wondering, what would have happened if I played? Could I have won a championship if I have played? And I completely follow that line of thinking. Like you said, I couldn't deal with the not knowing. Well, what would have happened? What could I have done? I could not deal with that. I hate uncertainty. We've talked about it a lot of times. Like, again, I would rather the news be bad than up in the air. I can deal with the bad, but the uncertainty would drive me nuts. So I completely get that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that if somebody ever did try to do that, oh, hey, I won a Super Bowl at age, 27, won an MVP, and I called it quits because I'm on the mountaintop. I got to call it quits in the MVP season that I won the Super Bowl. Yeah, they're coming out of retirement at age 30, 31, 32. You know what I mean? Like, it's not lasting. They're not being done. They are coming out of retirement at some point and likely destroying that because they're not going to be able to find it again. Once you lose that hunger, you lose the curiosity of how good can I become? What can I do? What can my team achieve? I don't think you can ever quite get back to the same spot of focus and like mental fortitude to get through it.
Yeah, sometimes that opportunity is there, and then when it's gone, it never comes back. Andre Garibay, YouTube channel member, says, ask Brock again in 10 years, and that answer will change.
Yeah.
Maybe if he doesn't have a Super Bowl, probably, yeah. And I do think that the fact that Brock was so early in his career did influence the answer. But, as the kids say, there are levels to this, Levin. Like, there are some people like Jimmy Garoppolo, who was like, and I'm not trying to bash Jimmy Garoppolo here, but Jimmy was, I'll put in my time. I'll work as hard as I can when I'm in the building, but when I'm out of the building, I'm out of the building. Okay.
Yeah. When I'm out of the building, I have a different phone, and the one that you have the phone number to will get turned off.
There's that. There's guys that are, hey, I'm going to bust my butt and do everything possible because I need to win a championship. I won't rest until I have a championship. And then they get a championship and they're good. Doesn't mean they don't work hard, but they never have that hunger to get back and win another one. And then you have guys like Tom Brady, who had a fistful of rings and they said, which Super Bowl is your favorite? And he said, the next one. And Jordan was like that. And Kobe Bryant was like that. In fact, that's one of the things that Kobe Bryant and Shaq fought about. Shaq was, hey, I got my ring. I'm good. I'm going to take it easy. I'll work my way into shape during the season, and if it happens, it happens. And Kobe was the complete opposite. Kobe is like, dude, we should be winning every year. Come on, we got this. And that's part of the reason why it didn't work in LA. Well, it did work, but it didn't last in LA as long as it could have or should have, considering how great both guys were, because there was that just difference in mentality. So there are levels to this. And to me, Brock, based on that answer and things he said and done, to me, he strikes me as the next one, like that type of hungry guy.
Yeah, I think Brock is never satisfied. I personally liked the other question at the end more. If you could win one Super Bowl with the 49ers or 3 Super Bowls with the Seattle Seahawks, which do you choose? He took there's only one way he can answer that. And they even said on the show, like, that
they do.
That's not what you're really answering. But I mean, the truth is, I'm taking the 3 Super Bowls because if I win 3 Super Bowls, I'm definitely in the Hall of Fame. That's the truth of it. But of course, he said, I know Niner fans are listening. I'm getting the one with the Niners. It's like, now, winning one Super Bowl doesn't really do anything for your Hall of Fame credentials. It's certain. I think it helps a little, but there are Hall of Famers that had no Super Bowls, and there are a lot of non-Hall of Famers who had 1. If you win 2, you had to have had almost nothing else in your career. Otherwise, you're going to get in the Hall of Fame. If you win 3, you're 100% a lock to make the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I agree that if you get 3, There's no question about it. But that was, I mean, they even acknowledge like that is such an FU question. You know, you and I go back and forth about how to ask questions properly and that type of thing. That when he said that, I just started cackling because that is there's no way to answer that.
Right. And I think there is something to be said. If he's towards the end of his career, it might change the answer. Like if you ask George Kittle right now, can you win? You can win one Super Bowl with the 49ers and you stay with the 49ers the rest of your career. Or you can get traded prior to the season to the Seattle Seahawks and you will have 3 more all-pro seasons and you will win 3 Super Bowls in a row, become the first team to ever win 3 in a row. I think for George Kittle, and if I was in George Kittle's shoes, I would say, no, I'll stay with the Niners because he's already got a Hall of Fame career pretty much locked up. So there's not much left other than achieving things that are personally important to you.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if he would answer it that way.
If he went and got 3 more All-Pros and won 3 Super Bowls with the Seattle Seahawks, he probably gets to take the title of the best tight end of all time. So that does throw a little bit of a hesitation in there. But I think Kittle would probably answer the 49ers, and I think I would find that truthful, whereas we know Purdy was lying. But I think there's a difference when you've already achieved enough to where your career is essentially like you've achieved all of the accolades you could possibly want other than winning 1 Super Bowl.
How about Brock just wins a bunch in San Francisco? Let's go with that. Let's go with that.
I'll settle for 1 right now. Like I'm not looking at, I won 2, 3, 4. I'm not doing the Miami Heat thing. Give me 1, and then we'll assess from there.
Well, Jason and Steph got into an argument yesterday about, would you rather win 1 and never come close to ever winning it again, or roll the dice and take your chances and maybe you get 1, maybe you get 0, maybe you get 3, maybe you get none. And Steph was, give me the 1. I'll take the guaranteed Super Bowl and live with the rest of it. And Jay was the complete opposite. I agree with Jay. By the way, I'm a roll the dice and let me see. I'll bet on myself to win as many as I can. To win 1 and then never come close to ever winning 1 again, that ain't it for me.
Is saying yes to that question is one of those things that you say and then 5 years into the being terrible,
right?
You regret that answer.
I agree.
It's different I thought you were going to go with you will win 1 Super Bowl, but you're guaranteed to never win another one. Or you can make at least the conference championship game every single year, but you're not going to win the Super Bowl. Well, that is, I will win 1 Super Bowl and be terrible the rest of the time. I don't care to come that close all the time and never actually win 1.
Yeah. Like, can I just say, look, I'm living right now the existence of win a Super Bowl and never win 1 again, right? I was 9 years old in 1994 when they won. And now the rest of my time after that has been not winning a Super Bowl. And I got to tell you, it's not very much fun. So I will roll the dice and take my chances of winning as many as possible. That's always me. Like, I get that we all want to win a Super Bowl. This idea that some Niners fans don't care if they ever win a Super Bowl is ridiculous. Every team wants their team to win a Super Bowl, as many as possible. But also, we can still recognize that even without a Super Bowl win, they've done some incredible things.
Yeah, it's just different when you have a chance. All right, every team, unless they're the Minnesota Vikings, wins a Super Bowl at some point. You know what I mean? Like at some point, you're going to win 1. So I'll keep taking my chances because forever is a long time. And while I'm not quite 40 yet, that means I have like at least hopefully 35 more years of watching football. I'd rather take 35 chances of winning 1 than have win 1 at age 40 and the next 35 years of my life not be able to enjoy football nearly as much. Because it is like last year was not very fun.
No,
it was not fun to be a Niners fan last year. So like, no, I think that is an answer. Steph's answer comes from starvation. She is starved of and PTSD. She is starved of that Super Bowl. Steph's not old enough to really know the first one, which, to be fair, like you said, then you won 1 when I was age 9 and I haven't won again. So I know what it's like. I became a fan immediately after that season. Okay? I
Well-
became a fan of the Houston Rockets immediately after they won the two because Barkley got traded there and then they didn't win one. So, like, when it comes to torture of an NFL or a sports fan, I don't think there's a bigger one than me because I'm also a Purdue fan, which is they finally made a Final Four 2 years ago. That's the first time they've made a Final Four in my lifetime, despite having about 12 Big Ten championships in my lifetime.
Well, and Steph mentioned that too. Well, her expression was, all I've known is pain as a 49ers fan, because that's it. Like, close but no cigar has been her 49ers life. I do want to just mention one thing, because there are a lot of 49er fans, especially 49er fans that are my age or older, who I think honestly are super uppity, who think that they are a superior fan because they saw the Super Bowls of the 80s and that's the standard. And if you don't live up to that standard, you're a lesser 49er fan or you don't get it. And I got to tell you, that's a bunch of crap. Okay. Acting like what the 49ers did in the 80s is the standard or what they do every year ignores the whole of NFL history. Those are special eras. They're called dynasties for a reason. They're super hard to do. They don't last forever because they are super hard to do. And I think that segment of 49ers fans has to look at the 80s for what they were. An incredible era of 49er football, a fantastic era of 49er football. So fantastic because it's so hard to do and doesn't last. Acting like that should be the standard is ridiculously high expectations. No one has that every year. Nobody. The Patriots had it longer than anybody, and they're a crap show right now because it's really hard to maintain. So you're not a superior fan or a smarter fan than other 49er fans when you say, well, it's the 80s and the standard is Super Bowl and we're the 49ers. That's just not realistic.
You know, you just put the stop, Max. I was thinking about how the Niners won 5 Super Bowls in 12 years. An insane stretch. And outside of those 12 years, they've known no championships. So it's a very small window of their history that has championships.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned the Green Bay Packers and how, you know, they won the first 2 Super Bowls and then had this long drought. That's actually a pretty good analogy for what the 49ers franchise is right now. They are this team that was really good 50 years ago, 40 years ago.
40, it's not quite 50 yet. Okay.
Well, I mean, it started, I was thinking Joe Montana drafted in 79,
Yeah.
70s to 20s. But 40 years ago, they had this really good team, and they've never been able to achieve that again. Now, the Packers went from the 60s to the 90s. So you're entering the era that you would have Brett Favre coming. Well, Purdy is similar in terms of this kind of unknown guy suddenly becoming, you know, he was an MVP candidate. Brett Favre obviously won multiple MVPs, but like it is a pretty good analogy of 30 years after dominating the NFL, here comes this guy that nobody thought would be the franchise quarterback, suddenly being a franchise quarterback. If they end up winning a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy, that's probably the best comparison in terms of like what that storyline and history going together would be.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. What is it with me agreeing with you all the time on this show? I don't like it.
It's called perspective. You've gained it.
Oh, yeah. I wonder when I had my epiphany.
When you turned 40, apparently.
I do think that just, yeah, there is. It's weird in a way. It's like the dynasty of the 80s has almost become toxic to today's fandom. You know, it's a strange thing that has happened through the passage of time.
Well, that was my initial thought. Like the 49ers dynasty is almost becoming a joke in one sense. Obviously, like nobody jokes about how dominant that era was or those actual teams. But if it was not for the Cowboys, the Niner fans, that would be the thing that fans would just start destroying them over in like an argument of pettiness. And
yeah, you were great for 1 decade 30 years ago, and you've done nothing since. Like the Cowboys saved Niner fans from constantly getting ridiculed for that because the Cowboys won, obviously, a Super Bowl right after the Niners' last one, but then they've never even made a conference championship game since. So how can you make fun of the Niners for it when the Cowboys are much, much, much worse example, right? Sitting right there in the NFC. Like, but to me, like I started viewing like these last 30 years as almost like an embarrassment. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
we came from so high, and like for a long time, most of my childhood, and I know you're going to agree with this, the thing Niner fans used to brag about is we've never lost a Super Bowl. That
Mhm.
used to be like one of the biggest bragging points of we've never lost a Super Bowl.
And they had 5.
Right. And now they've lost 3. So like you've lost the biggest bragging point. Like it's a weird thing. Like it's been enjoyable, but at the same time, like especially the last 15 years has also been so much worse than the previous 15. The previous 15, they were a bad team, and I knew it for after like 2002.
Well,
The
and
last 15 years is about as tortured of a fan base as you can get.
the thing with the Cowboys too, the Cowboys can say, hey, we won 2 Super Bowls in the 70s, in addition to winning 3 and 4 years in the 90s. Yeah. So we've had different periods where we've won championships. The Niners have had a championship period. Now it was awesome, but but they have had that one period, and outside of that, they've had nothing. So, and like you pointed out, the Cowboys can say, hey, we've won a Super Bowl more recently than you have. So great that you made all these NFC championship games, but we actually got the damn thing done more recently than you have. That is also a true statement that my friend RJ Ochoa likes to bring up whenever we have this discussion, and he's not wrong.
Yeah, it is. It's weird that the Niners are, I think, pretty. If they don't win a Super Bowl with Kyle Shanahan, I do think that they're going to become one of the fan bases that's made fun of the most. They're gonna enter like what the Cowboys are now.
And it's in a way too, it's like because they've come so close, like that's more fuel for the fire. You know, it's like Cowboys fans, we laugh because they haven't made a conference championship game. Well, the Cowboys are like, well, you guys keep gacking up Super Bowl. They've come as close as you could come. I mean, hell, they were in overtime of the Super Bowl, and it got all the way down to the end of overtime of a Super Bowl. That's how close. That is like as close as, other than the Bills having a football in the air with a chance to win or lose based on where that football lands, the Niners came as close as anybody in a Super Bowl and didn't win it.
Yeah, I mean, the Bills obviously are the only team, I would say, that surpasses the 49ers in terms of take a 15-year window of history, who's more tortured of a fan base. Well, I think the Bills are the only one that surpassed what the Niners have had in 15 years, losing 3 Super Bowls and making what, like 7 or 8 of the NFC Championship games. So it's insane how close the Niners have come in so many years to not actually have won a Super Bowl. It's about as tortured as you can get. And I will say, I would bet if you're taking a 15, 20-year period of any team's history, there is no team that changed like regimes in that period that is more tortured, because the Bills, it all happened in one small window with that same regime. They didn't change the team completely, bring in a whole new coaching staff, whole new front office, all new players, get to the same level and fail once again.
Mike Florio has a column up on profootballtalk.com, and he talked about teams with a chance to win the Super Bowl, and he listed the 49ers as one of the teams in the NFC, and he has a little nugget in there that's crazy to think about. Since 2017, so in the Kyle Shanahan era, you have had 4 teams in the NFC make Super Bowls. The Eagles 3 times, the Niners twice, the Rams twice, and the Bucs. And the Bucs was just because Tom Brady was there and it was the pandemic year. Like, that is it. That is the stretch in the NFC. There has been dominance in the NFC by a very, very small group of teams. And in the AFC, it's even less.
They've all won one other than the Niners.
Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. In the AFC, it's even less. It's Patriots, Chiefs, and Bengals. That's it. Those 3 teams in the AFC have made the Super Bowl since Kyle Shanahan became the head coach.
Our one Bengal fan listening just rejoiced because they actually got mentioned with the Super Bowl.
I continue. I mean, God, that would have been the year to make it. The one year you didn't have to face Mahomes in the Super Bowl. To me, there is no way the 49ers lose to that Bengals team. I believe they beat that Bengals team that year in Cincinnati.
Is that not the infamous meme of the guy standing up in the crowd and doing the, sign of not the finger, but the sign of FU that became like a big meme that year? I think it's that. I know it was the Cincy game, and I think it's that year. We played them 2 years in a row, so I can't remember if it was exactly that year, but I think it was.
Oh, man. I'm tired of talking about the futility, man. I'm ready to be hurt again. I really am. Like, the closer we get to the season, the more geared I'm buying into everything. I'm buying into everybody's here. Everybody's at the facility. We're all working hard. John Lynch is looking out his window and everybody looks good. Like, I seriously cannot wait for the preseason to start. I can't wait to watch all the position battles. I really do think that they could have one of those years. It could be like a 2019 type of season for them.
Can I say, like, I am in a weird spot. Like, we're getting closer, so the thoughts are starting to creep in. Usually I'm pretty good, like, June, like after the draft, like I don't really get into, like, I start thinking about, oh, how good could the Niners be? I usually do a pretty good job of keeping it out, but we're getting close enough now where it's creeping in. And I find myself, and I think I just realized this while you were talking, I think I have more hope this season than I had last year. Because last year it was the same team, and I knew with the way that Super Bowl went, there is no way they're going to be mentally capable of pulling it off and winning the Super Bowl. I viewed them as a broken team in the offseason, and I think I was proven right. I mean, they said it now in the offseason that it was a really hard thing to get over, and they were never truly over that Super Bowl. This year, I have hope again. Last year, like, I went into the season thinking they cannot win a Super Bowl this year. There's just too much baggage. This year, I think they shed the baggage, so I'm finding myself having hope again.
That's the Levin Black I need on the show. I need that guy. Yes.
No, you don't. You need my negativity around you to bring you down to earth.
Bring more of that on the program, please. But yeah, no, like I get it. And I get, like, there's a lot of coin tosses. There's a lot of unknowns and a lot of, I understand all of that. And I acknowledge all of it.
It could go horribly wrong. Like, I'm not sitting here saying, oh, I believe they're a 12, 13 win team and it's going to be a great season, but I have hope that they could be. And I think part of it is, like, we have actual rookies that I'm excited about that I think could actually be stars. You know what I mean? We had rookies in the previous couple seasons, but it was more like, yeah, they might be able to contribute. This year, like, there's a couple guys that I think, ooh, that could actually be a star. A difference maker would be the way to point it. Like, I don't think in the last couple of years that I've gone into the season thinking, oh, that rookie, that could be a difference maker.
And that's how they got good in the first place. Forget the rounds that they were drafted in. They got Deebo Samuel, maybe the biggest difference maker of the Kyle Shanahan version 1.0 era. Fred Warner, difference maker. Nick Bosa, difference maker. Obviously, the trade for Christian McCaffrey. George Kittle, different. Like, they drafted not just good players. They drafted studs, best at their position players. And we have some guys that we think, like you said, could be actual difference makers this year at impact positions. And so it's going to be fun to find out, man.
Now, I know we're running over, but I can't end on positivity. So why don't we touch on the strength of schedule thing that you sent me?
Sure.
I forget how the wording they used, because it's not going to be a positive reaction.
Oh, boy. Okay. So for anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about, sportsbookreview.com had an article, and I'll throw it up on the screen so those that are watching can follow along. It's called the 2025 NFL Fatigue Index, and they ranked all 32 teams by travel, rest, and schedule quirks. Now, this is not just miles flown, because we've already talked about that. The Niners are, obviously, they're going to be one of the higher teams just where geographically they're located. But they have this formula that they have thrown into the mix to keep track of this thing. And they have the 49ers with the 7th toughest schedule this year in terms of miles flown, time zones flown, your circadian rhythm, and how far thrown off that gets. And Jason Ponte talked about it yesterday. He wrote it up on NinersNation.com. There's an article about it. Boy, you really can't see that at all. Sorry, it's way zoomed in on my screen. I didn't realize it wasn't zoomed in for everybody else. But there's the 49ers down at number 7. I sent it to you, Levin. I wanted to get your thoughts on it because you're a skeptical person. So after you read it and analyzed it, do you think that this holds water, that maybe the Niners schedule is tougher than we thought?
No, I do not think it holds water. If you scroll all the way up, or actually it's right there. They say it a second time. Proprietary formula. Now get the heck out of here. You're using simple, basic things like how far do they fly, how many time zones. There's nothing proprietary about it. In the talking from somebody that has a sociologist of a mother and just has interest in studies, if you're not willing to say what your formula is, then there is no conclusions that are worth their weight. Because if you can't open yourself up to scrutiny of how you computed what you computed, then there's no point of even really discussing them. They won't share their proprietary formula that's based off of how many miles you flew and how many time zones and your rest days and all that. It's complete, in my opinion. I don't know what their formula is, but it's a terrible formula, and I'm going to point out why. In that, the team that flies the most miles is the Chargers. The second team is the Rams. Both LA teams are 1 and 2. So they fly, the Chargers fly the most miles and the Chargers fly the second most. The Chargers are +5 in rest days, which is good. However, the Rams, I think they're tied for second at +10. They have twice as many positive rest days between games, meaning they have 10 extra rest days before playing opponents overall than their opponents do to them. Yet, despite the Chargers being worse at both, somehow they're flip-flopped in the rankings. Explain that to me. I cannot explain how a team that flies more miles and has less rest days is somehow ranked worse in their formula that is proprietary. And as Lee Ving says here, ChatGPT, I 100% believe they probably did compute it that way, because ChatGPT would go find the data from other people, and then they're just basically finding simple data and putting it together and coming up with a number. It doesn't stack up, because they say that they factor in rest days, they factor in how far they have to travel. Okay, then how is a team that's worse on rest days and worse on traveling have a higher or a lower fatigue ranking? It just doesn't make sense. And for the 49ers, like, they are one of, I think they're in the top 5 for rest days. Yes, they travel far, but they travel far every single year. It's not a coincidence all the West Coast teams have the most miles traveling. The only one that is an outlier with that is, for some reason, and I think it's because they're going to London, the Jacksonville Jaguars are in the top 5, but I think they're counting the Europe trips in that, which then throws the whole thing off. So it's just ridiculous to me.
They factor in games played, rest days, travel fatigue, road weariness, circadian misalignment, altitude change, wear and tear. But again, like, some of these are kind of vague terms, and they don't actually explain how much they weigh each one of those factors. You're right. They don't actually specifically weigh in on.
They're trying to say it's a proprietary formula, but if it's a proprietary formula, that just means you don't want to share how you got it, because you know people will pick it apart.
Well, and I tried to read specifically what they say about the 49ers, and there was one part of it that I can't wrap my head around. And let me bring it up on the screen here so people can see. Okay, here we go. Finally, as I scroll down, they say there's no way around it. The 49ers schedule is brutal, and a week 14 bye may not be enough to save this group down the stretch. The Niners enjoy the 4th best net rest advantage with 0 opponents coming off a bye, and boast the easiest strength of schedule based on last year's records. But the Niners travel the 5th most miles and 2nd most by a team without an international game, which is why they're on the wrong end of the 2 biggest net total fatigue mismatches of the entire season, week 11 and week 13. I don't get how those are net total fatigue mismatches. I went back and looked. I was like, well, is this team coming off a short week? And, the Niners coming off.
Are they talking about overall rankings? Because that's how, when they said that, Are they talking about, okay, week 11 opponent is ranked really, really, really low on fatigue? You know what I mean? So then the net ranking,
That would make sense, because otherwise I don't understand how they're this bad, the biggest rest or fatigue mismatches. I didn't understand, because every way I looked at it, I was like, I'm not getting it. So maybe you're right. Maybe it's overall. I don't know.
right? You were thinking small picture, like at the moment of that game, how big is the fatigue difference? Whereas they might have been talking big picture, which again would be another pointless thing. It doesn't matter what the big picture is. It matters in that moment, like in the games that are recent to that game, how much of a fatigue risk, because people recover.
Right. And week 11, I believe, is the game against Arizona, and week 13 is the game against Cleveland, which, man, I don't want any advantage for Cleveland. We got to go back to Cleveland to play that game. We all remember what happened the last time the Niners were there. But yeah, when Jay brought that up and I started looking at it, I was like, I don't know how much stock to put into this. And I thought you might have that perspective on it. So I figured you'd be a good person to ask.
Yeah, put it this way, I didn't even read the team breakdowns because I read the first part, like, okay, how are they coming up with the numbers? And then I saw the rankings, and I had just viewed, or actually, no, I Googled it after. I was like, that's weird because the Niners are towards the top of rest days. Let me look that up to see where people are ranked in rest days so that I'll have that to put at you, because I couldn't remember exactly where the Niners were ranked. And in looking at that, I noticed the discrepancy between the Rams and the Chargers and their overall ranking. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. One team travels more miles and has 5 less rest days, yet somehow they have an easier or lower fatigue ranking. It doesn't make any sense.
And I should point out, Sportsbook Review is a betting website. Like they're telling you can use this data, their proprietary formula, to help you make your bets. So there is, I'm just saying there, a little bit of an incentive. But I thought it was interesting when Jay brought it up, just because, we've heard nothing but good things about the Niners schedule. So again, somebody
speaking of good things, in doing that Googling, I found instead of rest days, it was showing the strength of schedule based on Vegas prediction.
Yeah, that's what I use. I've been screaming about that forever.
Like, the Niners are so far and above having the weakest schedule based on Vegas predictions, which I think going into the season, that's the best way to predict. Vegas has a long history of being more accurate consistently than others. There might be a single season where other people were more accurate, but over time, Vegas is by far the most accurate predictor of team records. And the Niners are, I remember it was just like a bar graph type of thing where they had the team logos, higher up meant easier. And the Niners, there was a big gap between them and second, and then another big gap between second and third, meaning against the average, the Niners are way, way, way easier based on Vegas predictions.
Warren Sharp has talked about that. And I always go by that because the previous year's record doesn't take into account coaching changes, free agency, the draft, anything.
The scheduling. The schedule is a massive factor in team records.
The Vegas win total takes into account everything. And like you said, Vegas don't got those fountains and palm trees out there for being wrong a lot of the time. And I think I have the graph here. Let's see if it will come up. You can literally see hold on, there we go. The Warren Sharp graph. It's hard to see. The Niners are in the upper left-hand corner, way far away from everybody else in terms of strength of schedule. It's not even close how much better off, I should say, the 49ers are. The Patriots are number 2, but the gap between them is ridiculous.
Yeah, the Niners have a very easy schedule, which is why if they don't make the playoffs, I don't see how this regime survives. They have such an easy schedule. They have to at least make the playoffs.
There we go. That's a little easier way so you can see the gap there if you're watching on the stream. I agree. Like, it's all set up for them. Now, if they're massively injured like they were last year, that obviously changes the conversation. But if they're not injured, they got to make the playoffs this year. I still don't think the NFC is that strong overall as a conference. Obviously there's good teams, the Super Bowl champions in the NFC, but you can't tell me the Niners are not one of the best handful of teams in the NFC right now, even with all the questions they have. I still think.
I think it can be argued they're worse than last year because you have the Lions. Their coaching staff got raided and they lost some key players. I mean, they had a surprise retirement even. So they're worse. The Eagles, okay, they're coming off a Super Bowl victory. Do they still have the fire? That's always
They
a
lost
very
a
big.
lot of people too.
They have lost a lot of people. And you have Minnesota. Well, Minnesota has changed quarterbacks. Is J.J. McCarthy going to be as good or better than Sam Darnold last year? I mean, he could be, but he also could be worse. So, like all of the top teams from last year in the NFC have question marks. There are some teams I think that were in like that middle ground of borderline playoff, maybe snuck in, that have improved. But there's a lot of the teams at the top. Like, I don't think any of the teams, you look at them and you go, oh, that's a dominant team, other than Philly. Philly's the only team that on paper you should look at them and say, well, yeah, they should be a dominant team in the hunt for the number 1 seed.
Yeah, I mean, Philly, like, playoffs right now. Like, they're going back to the playoffs.
The things that worry me about Philly are not things that are on paper. Saquon Barkley had a massive amount of touches, and he's had a very loud offseason. Is he going to be in the same focus, the same level? Does he get injured because he had 400 plus touches last season?
He was so good. I keep going back to this Josh Norris tweet because it blows me away. Including the playoffs, Saquon produced runs of 78, 72, 70, 68, 65, 62, 60, 59, 55, 41, 39, 38, and 34 yards, and 8 of those went for touchdowns. That is such a good year. Like, the odds that he's going to be able to do that again are slim to none, and that's not a knock on Saquon Barkley. That's an historically good season. Even if he stays healthy, he's probably not doing that again.
For Niner fans, it's like Debo's one great year. He had so many long touchdowns in that season that it skewed the overall numbers. Not saying Saquon Barkley isn't one of the best, if not the best running back in the NFL, but expecting 2,000 yards again is, you're going to be disappointed.
Just the explosive runs. Like, we all remember that Christian McCaffrey week 1 run against the Steelers where he runs, right to start the second half. He gets the block from Ayuk and runs it for a touchdown. Saquon Barkley did that like 8 times last year. That's how incredibly good he was. And I don't think he's going to be able to produce that again, because who the hell would be able to produce that again is my point. And he was obviously a huge part of their resurgence. Now, in the Super Bowl, he actually didn't have a great game running the football, but obviously the Eagles did other things well, and the defense played really well and all of that. But yeah, there are questions. Even though I think the Eagles are really good, there are certainly questions about it. There's questions about every team. No, the NFL is built so that every team has flaws.
I have a new favorite comment of all time.
Oh boy. Go ahead.
Terrier Dome says, oh, sorry. He just reposted something in it. This is the first one. Terrier Dome says, losing Sorensen is like saying I flicked a booger. Because people are saying the Niners lost 2 coordinators. It's like, yeah, losing Sorensen is like saying I flicked a booger. Yeah, you lost a booger, but you lost something bad, not something good.
Well, and not only that, the Niners didn't lose a coordinator. Kyle Shanahan's the offensive coordinator. He always has. I don't care that they named somebody offensive coordinator this year. It's Kyle's offense. But I do agree with Terradome on that comment. Earlier, I disagreed with him on the Super Bowl discussion we were having as he was laughing at us in the chat. But that one I agree with, Terradome. So, see, we can agree to disagree at times. It's fine. I'm sure Nick Sorensen appreciates being, called a
like I said, I do feel a little bit of a little sorry for him, a little remorseful, because I don't think it was his fault. And I do think his career might have gotten destroyed because of it.
He might like being a good coordinator.
Right. He could have ended up being a really good coordinator. There is a reason why Kyle chose him over other young people in the building, but getting it and doing so poorly in it and not being able to make any adjustments means he's likely not to get an opportunity anywhere else anytime soon. Like, he's probably going to have to spend a decade being a top assistant to a defensive coordinator before a team would give him that chance again.
Yeah, he was in over his skis. He was not really he wasn't ready for that job. Maybe someday he will be, but clearly last year he wasn't. And we all know that. And fortunately for us, we don't have to deal with that anymore. That's the magic of divorce. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Please like and follow us on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review. Tell us what you like. We still got a couple weeks before training camp starts. If there's a specific topic you want us to talk about, we're all ears. Throw it in your 5-star review and we can get to it on a show. We would really, really appreciate that. Like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're here every single weekday. We greatly appreciate all the support you have given us, and we hope that you continue to do so as we get closer and closer to the season. Levin, be more positive. Bring the positivity. I like it.
Are you going to cut me off again mid-sentence, or